We are knee-deep in player evaluations, looking back on 2024 and forward on 2025. Thank you to Phil Miller's column in the Star Tribune. So we're just going to keep rolling with a few more pitchers. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren. You can follow me on the tweets at Brandon_WARNE. Thank you for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. I am joined by Mr. Dave Brown, a ball writer since the summer of Sosa and McGuire. In the BBWAA since the second year the Twins were dreadful at Target Field. That's 2012, if you're wondering. And a Hall of Fame voter since this year. So second ballot coming up here at the end of the season. Dave, what up?
I'm feeling psychedelic, Brandon. I've got the Twins, the Metrodome background, giant milk, baggy, and I'm also apparently casting a spell. So
yeah, you're looking pretty psychedelic, if I can be honest with you. Yeah, so in this episode today, we're going to talk about a handful of more pitchers. We're progressing alphabetically through the pitching staff, and then we will jump across to hitters. But for now, we have some pretty interesting arms. Obviously, a veteran mainstay in the bullpen, a veteran mainstay on the starting staff, and then we'll get into a few prospects as well. This episode, by the way, is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Dave.
Yes.
We finished last episode with Cody Funder down under. We had David Festa, Joan Duran, Daniel Duarte, and Randy the Dauber Dobnak. This episode, we are starting with a guy who I think has the potential to be this year's Cole Sands. By that, I mean the revelation in the bullpen. You know, Griffin Jax took a step forward, but behind him, backfilling, Cole Sands did too. And we'll talk about Cole Sands in a later episode because Sands starts with an S, and that's much later in the alphabet. So we'll get there when we get there. Brent Headrick. And he... As Phil so poetically points out, had a triumphant moment by returning to the big leagues after a season loss to forearm pain, and it lasted one pitch. His second one landed in the seats at Fenway. Yeah, that Fenway series, which was kind of the beginning of the end, was certainly an interesting one, and Headrick was right at the forefront of it. I think that was the one we were talking about. Scott Blewett and games that he pitched in that had high stakes, and his highest stake was that one that went to extras that the Twins somehow managed to win despite their best efforts. But yes, Headrick back, certainly not the ideal scenario, but for some reason or another, I am thinking he's got a chance to be a revelation next year in this bullpen.
Well, he's certainly going to get an opportunity, I would imagine. Based on how the lefties performed in 2024, mostly not well.
Yeah.
We talked about Funder down under and the other guys, Caleb Thielbar in his
infinite
dotage.
wisdom.
Yes, in his infinite wisdom. Yeah. It's good to have lefties, and homegrown lefties are even better. And Headrick seems to have a good arm. You know, I guess we worry a little bit about him missing most of the season with forearm pain. Like, you know, how repeatable is this going to be? Are we going to have to deal with this on and off all the time? You know, I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with just him as the left-handed guy, but I would certainly be more willing to jump in with him next season than any of the guys who were. You know, it's going to have to take a big turnaround for the lefties who were in the bullpen this year for me to be comfortable with them getting another chance. Headrick's an important piece, and I don't know what else is available or what they're interested in or what they can afford or what they're going to bother with in the free agent market or trades. But Hedrick to me is someone to be. I agree with your Cole Sands analogy. I think there's a chance that from the left-handed side he develops into something like that. He's an intriguing prospect for sure.
You're onto something too with left-handed relievers. Twins lefty relievers combined for 123 and 2/3 innings, so 22nd most in MLB. Not a ton, but that's good because it limited the damage they could allow. A 5.39 ERA, that's the highest in MLB. 813 OPS against, highest in MLB. Stop me if you've heard that one. And their whip, 158. Only the Rangers left-handed relievers were higher at 170. I think of whip as a pitcher's blood pressure. It might not hurt you up front, but it's definitely a sign of underlying problems. And Twins left-handed relievers obviously in a bad spot. I do think Headrick gets a long look next year, a longer look, again, assuming that he's healthy, which again, you can't assume, but 92, 93 with the fastball on average. And the further he gets from his rotation days, there's going to be a potential for him to see that jump some more. We'll see what he does with his pitch mix too. Obviously, guys pare down their mix the less they're starting and that sort of thing. So I'm eager to see. He used a lot of sliders in his appearance with the Twins this year against Boston. Not that that's, necessarily a sign of anything because it was only a handful of pitches, but he's always been a fairly big slider guy, fastball slider, which could make for an interesting repertoire out of the bullpen. So I think Brent Headrick is definitely interesting going into next year. With that said, also Phil notes he's a reverse split guy. So we'll see how they attack that.
Well, you know what? I'm okay with that because the way left-handers go, it's not how it used to be, where you had to worry about you didn't have to worry about left-handers coming in and being exposed to right-handed batters because you could change them out. And these days, it takes a little bit more strategizing and tactical analysis to do that. It's not, that's what Caleb Thielbar's big issue was. He was pretty good against left-handers for the most part, but very much exposed against right-handed hitters. And that's just it's too big of a thing to worry about just to have a left-handed guy in the bullpen. I would much rather have the 12 best pitchers than a mix of pitchers just because they're from one side they throw from one side to the other. It's good to give other looks, but these are all luxuries. You want your best guys. A, and B, you're going to go through 15 relief pitchers anyway in a season of significance. So you're going to have these guys around just in case anyway. I don't know if how much more Thielbar has or if Okert can be fixed. But Headrick being a reverse splits guy, that's fine. What you don't want is somebody who's really vulnerable against one side or another. Reverse splits or muted splits, that's okay.
Get out. That's all we care about. Yes. Yeah. Moving on quickly because this guy does not have much of a track record. Ronny Henriquez is 24, turns 25 next June. Born in the year 2000, which to me is still hard to believe guys like that are in the major leagues. Came over in the Mitch Garver trade with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, if I'm not mistaken. And Phil makes a note here. He's pitched 207 innings for St. Paul and 31 for the Twins. That feels like a verdict. Now, with that said, he is out of options next year. Hits 95, 96 on the gun. Not a ton of strikeouts, but again, we're assessing him on 19 1/3 innings this year, and in 2022, 11 2/3 innings. So not a huge sample size. Doesn't walk anybody. Doesn't give up home runs, at least not in the sample sizes of the big leagues. Seems to me like the kind of guy who's may go somewhere else and be a better version. He's only 24, like I said. Gives me a little vibe of Randy Rosario, who went over to the Cubs and just never really got going. A guy who you kind of see the potential in, but you don't have time to wait for it. And again, like I said, he's out of options next year. So see what happens.
He impressed me a little bit when he came in. He wasn't great he wasn't used a lot in high leverage, but he was a guy that you could bring into the game and feel like, well, it's not necessarily over when he pitches. They could probably get out of this, and very often he would do that. So I don't know how much potential there is for him to be anything beyond that. I don't. Whereas with Headrick, maybe he's got more stamina and pitch mix and more stuff to make you say, project. Well, he could be the next Cole Sands. Ronny Henriquez, less so. So I think he's a guy that. Phil maybe has a point about all the innings that he's pitched to AAA, and where his future lies, being somewhere similar to where he is now. A guy that's mostly, going to be either a AAA guy or someone who's going to hop around on waivers. So I was not unimpressed with Ronny Henriquez, and that's sort of a backhanded compliment, but I was much less impressed with other players. So he's a little higher on the list than some.
And I think guys like that are going to be more likely to stick if they're not planning to go out and sign a bunch of guys to the 40-man roster. That's where things will kind of get interesting. They also will have to add guys. And I haven't done any sort of research on that yet. That might be a good episode too, the guys that we think they'll add to the 40 to avoid, Rule 5 draft status and that sort of thing. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we have, in my estimation, the most important guy in the bullpen and then the most important guy in the rotation. So we got plenty of meat still left on the bone here, but we'll be right back. Well, we love PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And it's a customizable DFS experience. If you want to play the high stakes, high risk, you have that option. If you want to play it a little closer to the vest, turn your $10 into 25 or 30, that's an option too. But you can also mix and match. It's really up to you. You can do NBA and NFL. You can do a lot of different things. And honestly, you really just got to go into the app and see it for yourself. But you can win up to 100 times your money in as few as 4 correct picks. It's available in many states like California, Texas, Georgia, Minnesota. By the way, I know for a fact it's available here. PrizePicks puts their members first. Besides, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Dave, down in the second segment here, Griffin Jax is the next guy up. I guess that teaser that I gave for this segment doesn't help that much when his name is on the screen on the spot under today's show. So even still, Griffin Jax to me was, and I mean, this is not controversial, absolute necessary cog, vital pitcher out of this bullpen. But for my money, and that's not much, he was more valuable, more important than Jhoan Duran, which I think would have been at least somewhat surprising if you were to say that coming into the season. You're muted, Dave.
I didn't mute myself. Did I? Oh, yeah, I did when I was coughing. We don't want to be Kauffman Stadium.
Right.
So, sorry about that, folks. It wasn't that surprising to me that Griffin Jax ended up having the season that he did and maybe a little better than Duran. He seemed to be coming into that after last season. There is a note that bothers me, though, in Phil's column. Griffin Jax, 2025 outlook. He dreams of returning to the starting rotation with his improved pitch mix, but he's too valuable in game on the line moments to move. No, not another one. Not another Louis Varland. We can't do that. No, he's got a case of the Seth Lugos. He saw Seth Lugo doing this for the Royals, and now he has delusions of grandeur. Maybe they aren't delusions, but it would be smart on his part, maybe to explore that, because there's more. There seems to be more consistency year to year, and certainly more money in starting pitching. The way the league is going, I don't know. It seems like, we talked about like Ronny Henriquez. In other years, he'd be a great guy to have as the last man in the bullpen to pitch in low leverage situations. It just seemed like the Twins never had any of those.
Right.
It always seemed like there was high leverage situations going on, and nothing higher usually than when Griffin Jax would come into the game. That scares me a little bit that he wants to be a starter. But
yeah, I'm not likely to check that out if it's me. I don't know how much he can force that issue. Trevor May was the same way, where he wanted to be a starter, and he said the same things. There's more money in starting, there's less money in relieving, and the stability year to year statistically, which goes into how much money you make in arbitration and all that sort of thing, is certainly part of that equation. Now, also he is not a free agent until after 2027, which would put him in his age after his age 32 season. I don't know. I might consider like a 2-year bridge extension with him, where you get some cost certainty for the next 2 years and then still have the ability to decline that option and run a guy through arbitration like they could Alcala. I don't know. I think with the financial questions that they have, to have a 2-year deal that's maybe loaded a little heavier on the backside when you would expect TV revenues to be a bit more stable, a bit more predictable, I don't know. Maybe that's an option. But again, he's projected from Matt Swartz on MLB Trade Rumors to be a $2.6 million guy. I have no problem with that number or anything close to that. But it'll be interesting to see how they proceed with him, because he's not as young as maybe you'd expect a guy with his service time to be.
29 years old. I think the smart thing to do, and I hate to say this, would be to trade him. Mm-hmm. That would be the cold, analytical thing to do. 29 years old, coming off a career year, you could get a bleep ton for Griffin Jax. The Twins did finish, what was it, 4th? The Royals seem to be on the upswing. The Tigers seem to be on the upswing. The Guardians seem to be leveling off, but they're the first place guys. The White Sox are not really anybody to worry about yet. It would make a lot of sense in certain universes to trade Griffin Jax. I would hate it. It would be kind of a giving up on 2025 and sort of starting over a little bit. I don't know, with ownership being in question, is this a good time for that? I don't know. You would be trading, for a lot of future assets that you wouldn't have to pay yet. Maybe that would be appealing to new owners. It would make a lot of sense if the Twins really thought they were retooling to do that. But at the same time, you've got Carlos Correa, who's just turned 30, and Buxton, who's not getting any younger. And Pablo, you kind of want to win right now because of those guys. So yeah. I don't think they're going to do it. But in another universe, it would make sense to trade Griffin Jax.
Yeah, or in a universe with no real PR consequences, because obviously Twins fans would not love that. And it wouldn't be the first time that they've traveled those waters. They did it with Taylor Rogers in the Chris Paddock trade, where it was Rogers and Brent Rooker, if I'm not mistaken, to the Padres, and got back Paddock and a few other pieces. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, Rogers was an impending free agent. That's not the case with Jax, as we've noted, but they haven't been nervous or gun shy about pulling the trigger on trading a pivotal reliever. So yeah, I think it could be an option for sure. But with that said, I wouldn't bank on it. I also wouldn't bank on a move back to the rotation.
That would, it would just scare me with how it didn't really work out with Varland. It appears that Jax is further along in his development than Varland was. I don't know if it's a apples to apples consideration. But yeah, it would scare me just for the recency effect of that. And the Twins aren't necessarily short on young starting pitching either. You know, they have guys who they're bringing into the rotation this year, and there are future guys in the minor leagues that they're going to want to try in the coming years. And they have a couple of veteran guys already. It's not like they're really hurting there. So I don't know if there is an opening for Jax to go back into the rotation. But like I said, I can understand why he might want to try that.
All right, let's take our last break. When we come back, we'll talk about Pablo Day. It's going to be Pablo Day on Locked On Twins, and we'll get to Zebby Matthews as well before we get out of here. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game that you're watching, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. That's right, I'm talking about the FanDuel app, and they'll get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. We're already looking forward, looking ahead to next Sunday night where the Vikings will be without Christian Darrisaw, who is going to go under the knife for season-ending knee surgery. Love to hear that about your starting left tackle, your bookend tackle. But for now, Vikings favored 6.5, minus 310 on the money line, over under set at 46.5. If you want to get in on that action, again, FanDuel is the place to do it. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. And now we're coming down the stretch here, and we got to dedicate quite a bit of time to Pablo Lopez just because of the pivotal role he plays on this team as the opening day starter. I think I saw somewhere that he'd be the first 3 straight opening day starter since Brad Radke, or first pitcher to make 3 straight since Brad Radke 2 decades ago, Phil says. So that level of stability at the top of your rotation, certainly valuable. In some respects, Lopez took a step back this year, but when you look at his numbers, I mean, there's not that much to quibble or squabble with. It's just, again, maybe a Jhoan Duran situation where it just was a little less dominant in spells than you would have expected.
I think you look at some of the granular details. His FIP was pretty similar. It's always kind of about how it is, 3.6. Maybe strikeouts down a little bit, home runs up a little bit, and some bad timing there. Maybe made for a stretch or two where that sort of skewed his numbers a little bit. He's, I still expect him to have one of those seasons where more things go right than don't, and he's a Cy Young contender for sure. I mean that could come as soon as next year. So, and there are just so many. There aren't too many players in the league who command the kind of respect that he does. He's a good leader by example. He's very interested in his teammates and what kind of season they're having and what they can do to improve. And he has good advice to give. Those guys don't grow on trees. Not all teammates are created equal. I think he's definitely first among teammates as far as being a useful resource for other players. There's more to Pablo Lopez even than the numbers that he gives in his own starts. There's value there that goes beyond that. And, he's a finalist for the Marvin Miller Award and the Burro Clemente Award and all that stuff. So this is a guy who transcends baseball a little bit. And there is maybe someone else was MVP this year, but there's no more valuable twin really than Pablo Lopez. Maybe with the exception of Carlos Correa, but those are pretty high praises for players.
They've leaned heavily on those leadership types over the years, especially in the post-Joe Mauer era. You got Nelson Cruz, Correa, you have Lopez. They've prioritized upstanding citizens in the clubhouse who can. I don't know that Pablo leads with his voice much. I think he could. He's very soft-spoken, but definitely lead by example types. One of my favorite stories about that was Nelson Cruz in 2019. I told him, hey, you got Joe Mauer's old locker, because Mauer had retired the year before, and he goes, huh,
Right.
he left some hits in it. It was just kind of a funny little exchange there. Well, yeah, so Pablo, his salary is going to jump. He's going from 8 million to 21 million. It's a touch over 20. And so it's 21 and a half. And so again, he's going to be paid more like the ace that they expect him to be. He kind of reminds me of like a souped up Jose Barrios, which the Twins had and moved on from because they didn't want to give him 6 years. He found somebody who would, and they got Pablo on a more team friendly deal in terms of at least years. And 21.5 million for a pitcher of his caliber is still a slam dunk good deal for them. It would be a shame if they don't take advantage of underpaying their ace to put some talent around him, whether that's another hitter or bullpen help to support him, or another starter to just kind of ease the burden of him being a stopper when things go sideways.
I did find myself thinking at various points during the season, the Twins would have a losing streak or a stretch of games that was bad. It always seemed to be up to Lopez to stop it. And it's not that he wasn't up to it. It's just, you can't have a situation like that where that's the guy. There's only one guy you trust. You need, that's where Joe Ryan getting hurt kind of maybe was a big deal. So hopefully Ryan makes 32 starts next year and Bailey Ober makes 32. And out of the rest of the players, at least one of those guys sort of ascends to where Ryan and Pablo and near closer to those levels. So there's just fewer opportunities for losing streaks and more opportunities to end them.
And also fewer opportunities for guys like Zebby Matthews, the next on our list, who was pressed into duty. I think he had moments where he was what they had expected, and not moments where he wasn't what they expected, but where you could definitely tell he was adjusting to the league after it had adjusted to him. And that's not to say that most starters who end up being solid to very good don't have that stretch. Jose Barrios got absolutely annihilated his first few times around the league. Roy Halladay also, that was the case. There's been a few guys, and it's not to say either that that Zebby was annihilated, but you would hear some grumbling of, oh, this is supposed to be the next guy in this rotation. I don't see it. He's going to throw strikes. He's going to give you a chance every fifth day. For a fourth or fifth starter, which he could theoretically be even as soon as next year, you can do a lot worse. I'm not saying I'm not saying that next year is going to be his Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan style leap, but I'm on the Zebby train.
Yeah, I am too. I don't know. I would sort of maybe bet on Festa making that jump more than Zebby.
Yep.
And we sort of talked about that before.
Mm-hmm.
But Zebby, his ability to throw strikes and get people out in the strike zone is going to be where his bread and butter is going to be in the future. And that's a great weapon to have and a great advantage to have. Where obviously he needs to limit the issues is with the home runs. His home run rate is probably double. And we're just talking about 9 starts, so it's not really that much of a sample. But that's where he's going to have to continue to throw strikes without being vulnerable to home runs. I think he can do it. I think there's nuance in pitching and experience and confidence and maybe a little bit of luck that sort of all ties in that will let him do that. And I would not be surprised if he is a very maybe a half step above where Simeon Woods Richardson was for most of this year in 2025. And he still might be vulnerable to home runs. It's one of those things where, people are going for him. You're going to give up home runs. But if he can just limit that and keep his other things positive, he's going to be a very effective pitcher in this league. I'm excited to see how he progresses.
Yeah, the Louis Varland conundrum. Can you keep it in the yard, son? Well, not in the rotation. And hopefully Zebby, handles that a bit better. Well, looks as though we have 11 pitchers left, so we'll squeeze that into 2 more episodes. And then it's hit it in time. hitting time, easy for me to say. And so, again, appreciate people hanging out with us for these series. In the off season, it can be kind of tricky to figure out what path to take. And if this off season is disappointing as far as player movement, then we're crossing our fingers and knocking on wood that it won't be. It's gonna be series like this that get us through the chilly winter. But he's Dave Brown. I'm Brandon Warren again, saying thank you so much for hanging out with us on Locked On Twins, and we'll see ya
tomorrow night.
Or the next night.
Don't forget Sully.